You are listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. Today, we are in Gérardmer La Mauselaine.
We opened there with the sound of the Norwegian supporters in Nancy this morning, or just outside Nancy, cheering for their man Alexander Kristoff, who we heard on the podcast a few days ago. The only Norwegian rider in the race, but there's always a band of Norwegian fans, and they are getting right behind him, even though today we're in the mountains, which wasn't a day for Kristoff. My name is Richard Moore. I'm with Lionel Birnie.
Hello, Richard.
And Daniel Friebe.
Hello, Richard.
Where are we, Lionel?
Well, we're on the shore of the rather stunning lake at Gérardmer. It's fantastic. Low cloud, mini mountains. Very pretty, isn't it?
It's beautiful, the Vosges Mountains. Tourists come here a few times. Remember 2005 came here. Andreas Kloden was out-sprinted by Peter Weening. So we witnessed the first stage in the mountains today. Three pretty tough climbs right towards the end of the stage, made more difficult by rain and cold weather, really. It was pretty cold, wasn't it, Daniel?
It was very cold and wet, Richards.
And what were a French victory as well, Blel Kadri. What can you tell us about him, Daniel?
Well, he was very highly rated as an amateur. He's struggled a bit in the pro ranks, or struggled to be prolific anyway. He's kind of suffers from the sort of typical French malaise, or certainly the malaise that characterised their riders for a number of years, in that he really lacks a speciality. And I think I talked the other day in the podcast about how there's a real concern in France that there aren't enough amateur races that kind of really bring individual specialities to the fore. So there aren't enough mountainous races, there aren't enough races that are exposed to echelons, etc. And Kadri is really a product of that, someone who is very good in the sort of French Cup races, the kind of 200 kilometre fairly undulating races, but when it comes to the big one-day classics, Grand Tour stages, he has struggled.
Today was a little bit like a French Cup race, really, wasn't it, with a sting in the tail at the end?
Yeah, I was going to ask about his name, Blel. Is that a common name? Where does that come from?
He is of Algerian origin, and this is something else that's worth pointing out. There's a real kind of diversity now, particularly in the French peloton. We've got Nasser Bouhanni, who's also Algerian origin, Kevin Reza, who is from Guadeloupe. I think Johan Jen is riding for Europcar. I spoke to Jean-René Bernadotte, the Europcar manager, about this the other day, and it's something that he's very proud of. The fact that he's trying to introduce riders of as many different ethnicities as possible into his squad. He also signed Dan Craven recently. Dan Craven was brought up in Namibia. I think he's of English origin, but this is something that certainly Jean-René Bernadotte is trying to cultivate, and he talked about how symbolic it was, and how proud he was to see the podium of the French National Championships a couple of weeks ago, with Arnaud Demar on the top step, and then Kevin Reza from Guadeloupe was third, and Nasser Bouhanni of, as I said, Algerian origin was second.
I actually went and hung out at the AG2R or AG2R bus this morning.
That's another debate.
That's another debate. Just picked up a bit of the vibe of what was going on. Overheard Vincent Lavenu talking to French TV, and he said that for them the tour really kicks off here, and that all of their kind of climbing riders would get their own chances. That's not just Blel Kadri, but also Jean-Christophe Perrault and Romain Bardet. And I also found out today that Romain Bardet's sister is the woman who hands out the race results in the press room.
Young lady.
Young lady, I think, more than woman.
Girl.
Don't think you say girl, can you?
I think she looks slightly older than him. If you look closely, she does look very like him, actually. She's blonde, he's got dark hair, but otherwise spitting image of each other. It's
not like the Yates twins, though, is it? She couldn't sort of suddenly jump in and
swap one for who was it today? It's Adam or Simon in that break. Let's carry on talking about the breakaway for a little bit more, because and we'll talk in the next part about the sort of overall battle, which really didn't start today, but we certainly saw that ignited a little bit on the final climb. Also in that breakaway were Sylvain Chavanel, who who won in the Jura, didn't he, in 2010, not a dissimilar stage to this in a way, also ran off in bad weather actually in the end, and he took the yellow jersey that day. And today was a sort of day for him. It was surprising to see him dropped by Kadri. He was the first guy to attack. Kadri bridged up to him. Simon Yates tried to bridge across the two of them and didn't quite make it. But Chavanel at the Dauphiné as well has not looked to be at his best. It's his first year with the Swiss team IAM Cycling, or YAM, as I believe the proper pronunciation is, YAM Cycling. So it's a new and quite well-funded Swiss team with great potential, but they've signed a sort of slightly ageing star in Chavanel, and we haven't seen the best from him this year. Is he on the downward slope, Daniel, do you think?
I don't think he's got great form in this Tour de France, and he's not had a particularly good season. Again, the point I made about Kadri, Chavanel has always sort of been a luxury version of that French rider who doesn't really have that many discernible specialities. I mean, Chavanel's forte has become the sort of long solo raid from sort of 20 to 30 kilometres out. He's also one of the rare riders that can sort of outride a peloton in the last 10 kilometres. But, it's hard for those guys to win stages. And I always thought that today he would struggle if he left it until the last two climbs he had to go. Before then, he did. He went on the first climb, which was probably the right place to go, but he didn't have the legs. It looked like he was going to work well with Kadri for a time. There was a picture of them floating around the internet of the recent Route du Sud, where I think they'd taken part in a breakaway together, and that had gone pretty well, but not today.
Yeah, you had your crystal ball out today, Daniel, predicting on Twitter that Chavanel needed to go, doing your best armchair DS, armchair director sports thing today, predicting that Chavanel needed to go early, and he did, and that's probably because that was his only option. If Kadri had gone with him and then they could have worked together, that would have perhaps given him an outside shot. But I don't think anyone was going to beat Kadri today, were they? Unfortunately for British fans listening, Simon Yates was he was sort of in no man's land for a little bit, wasn't he? Trying to bridge across, but not quite making it.
I think he bridged across in the first place as well, up to the group. So, those are huge efforts and very, very difficult things to do. Another thing, just lastly on Chavanel, he's somebody who's renowned as, when he's in a break, to be fully committed to it. And I always remember following a breakaway in 2010, he was in it with Juan Antonio Flecha, and who was the third member of that break?
Someone else who was very, very good in breakaways. It may have been Federico, perhaps. And the three of them, I remember being told those were the three best guys to be in a breakaway. All were fully committed. I spoke to Juan Antonio Flecha this morning. Actually, we'll be playing that interview at some point. Recently retired Flecha. And then Simon Yates. Yes, well, you spoke to Simon Yates and Adam Yates' mother, Daniel. I was told a story the other day about these Yates brothers who have had a terrific debut season. Adam in particular, he won the Tour of Turkey. He was up there in the Dauphiné as well, and the Tour of California. He's not riding the Tour de France, but the Tour of Turkey that he won, during one stage of that race, Simon fell and broke his collarbone. Apparently one of the DSs at Orica-GreenEdge drove alongside him and said, "Adam, your brother's fallen and broken his collarbone," to which Adam responded, "Keep your head on the race." But you spoke to their mother, I believe, Daniel. Yeah, she was mainly slightly put out at mistakes that were being made in the commentary, particularly. Can I say who it was? Well, there was one particular expert pundit who has been commenting on cycling for a very long time, who at one point pointed out that they were twins, and then said that Simon was 2 years older than Adam. Simon was 23 and Adam was 21.
That's a hell of a long labour, Mrs. Yates.
Mrs. Yates.
Yeah, but Mrs. Yates was actually almost quite flattered by this, because someone had sent her a message on Twitter saying that she ought to be nominated for Mum of the Year, having had twins 2 years apart. But she was obviously very excited. She said that she's been trying to get hold of Simon all week. He's not been replying to text messages or calls, but she said it in a very affectionate way. She said, as children, and particularly sons, often do, he pretends, she thinks he pretends not to see her messages or take the calls. But she was very excited, and she was just very happy that he'd got through this far in the Tour and made it into the break. If he had won the stage, I think she felt that just would have been the cherry on the cake.
Was it yesterday that he said something like he felt so fresh he didn't feel like he'd done any racing yet, so he's presumably feeling pretty good?
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt White at the finish said that today was the first day that he was actually given the green light to have a go. So you could almost say that today was the first stage, that he's raced in effect, and he's done really well. He did point out at the finish as well that his brother, and Daniel will know a bit more about this, but his brother Adam Yates followed a different path to him and came to France to an amateur club based not very far from here at all. And so Simon Yates has come over to stay with him and trained on these roads and knows them pretty well. And these are the sorts of climbs I think that at this point in his career would be perfectly suited to him.
Well, Blel Kadri won the stage, but Richard, you spoke to Cheng Ji of the Giant-Shimano team, the first Chinese to ride the Tour de France. He actually finished last on today's stage and is only a few seconds ahead of the Lanterne Rouge, who is Ted King, who we've also spoken to on the podcast. So this is your interview with Cheng Ji from this morning.
Cheng, what does it mean to you to be the first Chinese to ride the Tour de France?
It's actually it's just like it's part of my job. So I'm just finished down my job, but this is it. It's luckily because I'm the first Chinese to start this race. That's why, for my personal, I'm really happy to be in this team, to be in the Tour de France. When you're a cyclist, when you're a road bike rider, the dream will always be the Tour de France.
And is there a lot of coverage back home? Is there a lot of support for you back in China?
Yeah. Now there are more people watching the TV because they say we saw 5 or 10 years in TV or in the internet Tour de France. The people from China, you got a Chinese face started during this race. It's great.
And you were a runner originally. When did you start cycling? When did you first see the Tour de France yourself?
Start cycling, I think 2002, and it was from a sport change to sport. But when I started this sport, and then it's of course there was only the Tour de France is only the race shown on the TV. So this for us is the biggest race. It is biggest race of the world. So that's the beginning.
And your job here, of course, is to put in the early shift, I suppose. You're at the front of the bunch, early parts of stages, helping to keep the breakaways lead down to a minimum. We've seen other riders over the past years do this kind of job. Mentally, how do you deal with that?
Actually, it's hard. Actually, that's really hard, But that's hard job, and you have done this, and you get a chance to win. And when the team give you a lot of confidence and they believe you can do that. Last few years I did it really well already, so they gave me really trust. They believe I can make this happen, so I have to make it.
And we see Kittel win the stage, we see the lead out train. Do you feel part of that victory as well when it happens?
Well, when the situation like before, we don't have to control the whole race. Actually I can blend them to 8 kilometer. I'm riding in the front, or you can check beginning in Dubai. I also the last 3 kilometers I'm still in front of the splinter train. So just upon the situation how it's going to race.
And finally, I gather you're a very good cook as well. What's your special dish?
Doesn't matter. Just as everybody think, that's nice. Coca-Cola chicken wings. Yeah, it is.
And do you cook for the team ever?
Yeah, sometimes when we have a training camp or something, I cook for the whole team. They like it.
And where are you based, Cheng, during the season?
I stay in Holland most time.
The Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar, with Vincenzo, Lionel, Birnie and Daniel Friebe.
Not too sure about chicken wings in Coca-Cola, but it is making me think of dinner, which can't be too far away, Richard.
Lionel, you're always thinking of dinner.
I know, I'm actually blogging on my own website the meals I eat as I travel around France, Le Gourmet de France, lionelbirnie.com/gourmet, if that kind of thing interests you at all.
Absolutely, recommended. Let's do a bit more plugging. You can also read our blogs, and we've got Ciro Scognamiglio on Vincenzo Nibali coming up quite soon. He's written a blog about that. We just need Daniel to translate it.
Yeah, imminent.
It's imminent. It's very good though.
Very good.
I shoved it through Google Translate and it looked excellent.
Well, when it's shoved through Google Translate, it actually sounds exactly like Ciro.
Exactly like Ciro. Exactly. I actually bumped into Ciro and his boss Luca from Gazzetta dello Sport, and I I said to Ciro, thank you, Ciro, for your blog. It's wonderful. You're a hero. And to which his boss replied rather tersely, "We don't need heroes. We need journalists." So I don't know what that says about a week into the tour and the Gazzetta dello Sport team is falling apart. Anyway, let's crack on with plugging things. We've got our own blogs on thecyclingpodcast.com. We have a Twitter account at cycling_podcast, and we're on Facebook, the Cycling Podcast on Facebook. If you like us on Facebook, you stand a chance of winning a pair of Oakley sunglasses. Please also remember our other competition to win a rest day phone call from Jonathan Vaughters. That's a Twitter competition, so please tweet at cycling_podcast, hashtag JV call, and then explain in the rest of the tweet why JV, Jonathan Vaughters, should call you. What can he gain from calling you?
He was in sparkling form this morning, wasn't he, Jonathan Vaughters, marching off with a sort of army-style green jacket and a bright orange cycling helmet and a
briefcase.
And a briefcase. He was off on his way to collect a moose's head, I suspect, in some kind of mad. What's that game where you collect lots of things like treasure hunt, something like that? That would be hunt the sponsor.
I think he was off hunting sponsors. He's off riding his bike with sponsors for a few days. So anyway, he'll find time to make a phone call while he's away. Let's talk about the overall classification, because today you'll remember from last night's podcast that Michael Rogers sort of lamented the fact that Alberto Contador, his Tinkoff Saxo team leader, had lost time on the cobbles, and that they were disappointed that he's 2.5 minutes down on Vincenzo Nibali, and very keen to make time back as quickly as possible, and eat into that advantage really, even on days like today. And he did. He gained 3 seconds on Nibali today, just right at the end. Not really clear whether Nibali cracked a little bit or had a problem with his bike, or as he said at the finish, perhaps he was slightly overgeared and Contador dropped it down a gear. Daniel?
Just on the cobbles and Contador, did you chaps hear about the near dust-up that almost took place between Contador's mechanic and Valverde's mechanic?
Did not.
After the stage on the cobbles, there was a bit of a scene in the area where the buses were parked. Contador's mechanic felt that Valverde had got a tow from one of his team cars at a certain point, and it got very, very heated indeed, and they had to be broken up by Arrieta, Jose Luis Arrieta, the Movistar Direct Sportif. So there you go. Any hope that Alberto Contador fans or Alejandro Valverde fans might have of there being some kind of Spanish alliance, some kind of armada in the mountains, might be dashed by that news.
Mechanic wars, that's taking it to another level, isn't it?
Yeah, always been a little bit of friction between Contador and Movistar in that team, or not?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the Spaniards seem to get on extremely well, and we often hear about the prospects of alliances that never really come to fruition, especially in Grand Tours. But we have seen it before with Contador and Rodriguez, Joaquin Rodriguez, who had another absolute stinker today. But Valverde and Contador aren't quite as close, but they certainly get on okay.
So the overall picture then, it was a bit of a shuffle. Not too many majorly significant things happened. Obviously Richie Portes moved up into third position overall behind Nibali and Jakob Fuglsang, Nibali's Astana teammate. He had a pretty tough time on the last two climbs, didn't he? And Fuglsang, yeah, and lost a bit of time.
Had diarrhea this morning, I'm told.
That makes sense. I spoke to Chris Baldwin, who was very reluctant to. Chris Baldwin is Astana's press man, an American, quite an eccentric American, and he was very reluctant to let Fuglsang speak to any of the media this morning. He said it was because they were very nervous about today and they had their heads on the game.
Yeah, he's also been, we mentioned at the start of the podcast the Norwegian media, and I think the Danish media might be even worse in terms of just being there all the time for Fuglsang at the bus, at the starts and the finishes, and maybe just sort of managing that a little bit on Chris Baldwin's part. He's certainly a busy man at the moment, Chris Baldwin. We did do a long interview with him for the podcast, didn't we? A wee bit ago. And it was so long that we need to edit it down or release it in segments or installments or something.
Or a box set.
Box set, absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I thought today what was interesting was that there were these three climbs all towards the end. It was a real backloaded stage, and Tinkoff Saxo Contador's sort of day-glow yellow-clad team really did take responsibility early on. You know, we had Rafał Majka, the Polish rider who rode very well at the Giro, Nicholas Roach, Michael Rogers, all working really pretty hard for Alberto Contador on the front, and that, you know, that sort of plays into Astana's hands a little bit as well. It's
not if they shell Fuglsang out the back.
No. But for Nibali had a relatively comfortable day, and when Contador did finally go on that final climb, Nibali for most of it looked incredibly comfortable and very strong in the saddle, not troubled at all, and not in the penultimate climb, which was very, very steep. He looked very comfortable there as well. But Daniel, do you any idea what happened to him at the finish?
Well, he talks about wrong choice of gears in the final sort of only 200 metres really, when he got dropped, or when Contador sort of opened up a small gap. But he, I think, looked very, very good. He seems to be on outstanding form at the moment. You know, just watching him on those very steep climbs that aren't really his forte, particularly the penultimate one, which I drove over earlier. It was sort of a series of extremely steep ramps broken up by false flats, and that's not the kind of climb that Nibali favours. But I think he looked pretty comfortable today. He's very mindful of the dangers that are lurking on the next two stages through the Vosges. We've got another tricky one tomorrow. He doesn't think that there will be much going on in terms of a battle between the general classification contenders tomorrow, but there certainly will be on Monday.
And what about some of the other riders? Mikor Kwiatkowski of Omega Pharma Quick-Step.
The Polish pronunciation police are going to be out in force.
Kwiatkowski.
Michał Kwiatkowski, I think, something like that. Something like that. I should know this.
Kwiatkowski, I see. Kwiatkowski.
I'm half Polish, I should know this.
You should really.
Having a go at me, you're half Polish. Well, anyway, the Omega Pharma Quick-Step rider who's in the white jersey as best young rider, he was distanced, which perhaps was a little bit of a surprise. Andrew Talansky was on the floor again. Simon Gerrans nowhere to be seen this time. Probably about 20 minutes back at that stage, I would have thought.
I don't think you can blame Simon Gerrans for that one. Not really sure what happened. It was on the descent from the steep climb. Geraint Thomas came off as well, and it was certainly Talansky came off worse. I'm not sure if he hurt himself, but he had problems with his bike, with his chain. A roadside spectator tried to help him put the chain back on, which is often the worst thing that you can do if you're a roadside spectator, I think, interfering. So that perhaps, but it took him a while to get the chain back on, and he lost a lot more time. He's down in 16th now, 4:22 back. You know, that's a couple of bad setbacks for him.
And my tip that Jürgen Vandenbroek might make the podium, that's looking a bit ropey. He had a bad day, really, by his standards. The one main GC contender who lost a significant chunk of time.
But if you look at the top 10 now, Lionel, I was thinking this earlier, you know, it's not inconceivable that could be the top 10 in Paris. I mean, there's certainly guys who've all got decent credentials. We've got Nibali, Fuglsang, Port, Kwiatkowski, Valverde, Contador, Bardet, Rui Costa, and Jürgen Vandenbroek. That's the current top 10. On the fringes of that.
Did you mention Bout Malema there?
Sorry, I missed out Malema.
Yeah.
And then on the fringes of that, we've got sort of Thibaut Pinot 12th, good ride today, very good. 5th place for him. TJ Van Garderen 13th, Perrault 14th, but it's pretty settled now.
I think that Van Garderen, on the basis of his ride today, might come back into the top 10 at least, because he had a bad crash yesterday, lost a minute, and he was up there today. And I thought he looked quite strong on that climb. And when you know Contador and Nibali rode away, Port went after them, and Van Garderen was maybe the best of the rest at that point.
Nearly rode into somebody's back wheel though, didn't he?
Did he almost hit a spectator? Was that what it was?
Yeah, I think so.
Another prediction I will make, bold prediction on the basis of what we saw today, is that Pierre Rolland will not win the King of the Mountains competition. He looks tired. He really struggled on that penultimate, very steep climb, the Col de Gros-Pierre.
Well, he's been very busy lately with obviously the Giro d'Italia. Very good ride there. 4th place. Always looked a bit much to ask a rider of kind of Rolland's fragility, really. If you look back at the season, his typical season, he would do Dauphiné, Tour de France, and that would be pretty much his stage race season done. So asking him to do the Giro, where he was very good, and then the Tour de France is probably a bit much.
You're listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar.
Okay, another short-ish stage tomorrow, Sunday, 170 kilometres, Gérardmer to Mulhouse. Tell us about the roads tomorrow, Daniel.
Well, we've got, how many climbs have we got? Well, it's a big day for the King of the Mountains competition, we can say that straight away, because there are 6 climbs, actually, including one first category climb, the Markstein. The Markstein is sort of an intermediate summit on the way to the Grand Ballon, which I'm very excited about. It doesn't feature often in the Tour de France, the Grand Ballon d'Alsace, not to be confused with the Ballon d'Alsace, which is often mistakenly identified as the first mountain the Tour de France ever went over in 1905. The Tour de France actually went over a mountain on its very first stage in 1903. It was the Col de Pain-Bouchin outside Lyon.
All right. No, there's no need to show off.
Just a fun fact about the Grand Ballon d'Alsace. In the 90s, it was first
Mountain
measured.
High and Mountain High are available in all good bookshops.
It was first measured, the altitude was first measured in the early 19th century, and engineers took their measure from the spires of Strasbourg Cathedral nearby, which was the tallest building in the world at that time. The Grand Ballon peaked 1,145.6 metres higher than Strasbourg Cathedral.
We're still doing a cycling podcast here, right? Yeah. This still is a Telegraph Cycling Podcast supported by Jaguar.
Yes, one thing I've got to add, which I'm even more excited about, the following day stage, when the Petit Ballon d'Alsace will get its world premiere, its Tour de France premiere, and the race has never been over it. Anyway,
it's a strange stage though in a way, because it's a long way from it's the opposite today, where it was backloaded. Tomorrow's front loaded with climbs right from the gun, really, and it's a long way from the final from the Grand Ballon all the way down to the finish. There's a little rise en route, but that, it's a good 40 k's or something to the finish. So it's, what are we going to see? Are we going to see a breakaway? What are the overall contenders going to do tomorrow?
I think if they have any chance to do so, they will have a nice controlled day, take it easy, keep together. It's going to be hard to chase anything on what are pretty twisty roads as well. It's not just the up and downness, it's the twistiness of the roads, particularly in the sort of middle third. So it will be all about monitoring the break on the first col, which comes straight out of Gérardmer, the Col de la Schlucht. Did I get that right?
We're all looking
at Daniel, Sergeant Major pronunciation there. I'm anticipating kind of fireworks on that. If this stage was in the middle week, I would think it would be ripe for a bit of an ambush. It would be ripe for Garmin Sharp and their kind of tactics, ripping up the textbook and trying a play, as Jonathan Vaughters has described it. But I think because the La Planche des Belles Filles comes on Monday, most of the overall contenders will want to keep a lid on it. That's how I see it panning out.
Yeah, and it was equivalent day last year, of course, when Garmin Sharp did do that, but that was followed by a rest day, which is a bit of a difference. But at the same time, the tactic last year was all or nothing. It was all about the stage win that day. And if the wheels fell off the Garmin Sharp wagon, so be it. And that gamble did pay off. And you just wonder whether, I don't think it'll be Garmin Sharp, because I think they've got to nurse Talansky back to health. Can't take any risks there. But, that perhaps another team will try something quite audacious, quite adventurous. Yeah. AG2R are they've got a few riders who are, we saw one today, obviously, but Romain Bardet is still up there overall. Perhaps Christophe Riblon is well down overall, so he's not going to figure. He was the winner at Alpe d'Huez last year, of course, but they've had a great year, haven't they? And that continued today. Yeah,
and I was quite surprised that we didn't see a Europe car rider in the break today. Quite surprised also that they didn't chase as soon as the break formed, and there wasn't one of their guys in that quintet. So I think tomorrow could be a day for Thomas Vogler. If they still think Pierre Rolland can challenge for the King of the Mountains competition, then he will be another candidate tomorrow, because there are a lot of points available.
Yeah, I mean, the dream scenario, of course, would be that Contador and Tinkoff Saxo try something a bit kind of Dauphiné, Criterium du Dauphiné-esque, and do what Garmin did there. But I just can't really see it. I think Contador will save it for the big mountains where he will hope to crack Nibali, I think.
Would Contador have been disappointed not to get rid of Nibali earlier on today, or I mean, it was a very short climb and not like the climbs we're going to encounter in the Alps, but especially in the Pyrenees. He seemed to be riding in that sort of punchy style, standing on the pedals as we always see with Contador, but looking around a lot, and didn't seem fully committed to trying to drop Nibali at that stage.
I don't know how you read it, Daniel, but I thought that they were doing that to try and get rid of a few of the people who are in between Nibali and Contador, because once those guys are out of the way, I know it will happen at some point. Contador will overtake those people, but at the moment they're kind of cluttering the tactics a bit, aren't they? While they're still live players, then they've got something to race for. Get a few of those guys behind Contador, so it does distill down into this two-way fight that we anticipate seeing, because while all those riders are in between them, they're complicating matters. They're kind of metaphorically getting in the way.
Yeah, and I think...
And actually.
Well, yeah, they kind of are, yeah, exactly. They're in the group, they're restricting... there's more people to jump on the wheels, there's more people who will ride perhaps a little bit more aggressively rather than just defensively preserve their overall position.
Yeah, and the big victory potentially could have been getting rid of Fuglsang. They didn't manage to put too much time into him. He's still only 1 minute 44 seconds down. I mean, I just wonder whether they had any intelligence about Fuglsang's condition. Obviously, he's a Danish rider, heavily Danish influenced team. I don't think there were any comments to that effect at the finish line. I mean, it also, perhaps they're saying to themselves that it is going to be a wearing down process, and there are a lot of mountain stages in this Tour de France, and just because Nibali finished on Contador's heels today doesn't mean that they didn't do some damage, and he's got to recover tomorrow, he's got to recover for a difficult stage on Monday, so these efforts will perhaps tell in the third week.
You're listening to the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar. Tweet us at cycling_podcast.
Just finally, tonight there was another bit of news. Denis Menchov, the now retired Russian rider, it was announced that due to biological passport irregularities, he's been banned. It's a sort of meaningless ban, and it's, as with a lot of these cases, has taken a long while to come to light. Menchov's retired, but he's a former Giro d'Italia winner, a regular sort of contender in the Tour de France and Tour of Spain. Lionel?
I can't say I was terribly surprised. I think there were a lot of rumours about Menchov. In fact, I seem to remember one tour, was it 2010, where the rumour just seemed to go round every day that today would be the day that Menchov was going to get popped. I don't know where that had kind of originated from, but text messages and people were all saying, whenever there was a whisper in the air of something happening, people anticipated that might happen. And now we've got to just go back in. I'll go into the press room and just amend my Tour de France results for 2009, 10 and 12 because he's been stripped of those results.
Yeah, not really sure why it's taken so long, Rich, and I really need to read up on it because I'm sure there's a very good explanation, or perhaps not, because we've seen this before with the UCI.
Well, presumably they haven't been blood testing him since retirement. So presumably his very surprise retirement in the middle of the 2013 season was we don't know at the moment, but the suspicion is that was caused by.
Yeah, I mean that is a suspicion. It's very strange that it has taken this long to come to light, testing samples that were presumably over a year old, but that's the way the biological passport works. As we heard in our Brian Cookson special, which is available as a podcast. Brian Cookson was interviewed for the podcast. It appeared a couple of days ago, but the 20-minute, the longer version of the interview is available as a separate podcast. And in there, he did say, that it does take time, but that if people are cheating, he's confident that in the end, in the fullness of time, they will be caught.
Which really is a fundamental flaw of the biological passport, and I'm not sure this was thought about enough when the biological passport was heralded almost as a panacea, something that was going to solve all ills as far as anti-doping was concerned, because it's not particularly effective if in 2 or 3 intervening seasons guys are able to compete and win races and falsify results.
Yeah, but I think as Brian Cookson said, and as Anne Gripper said at the time when the biological passport was being introduced, she was the head of anti-doping at the UCI, the idea of the biological passport wasn't to be a kind of a chalkboard of doper catching. It was to lower the radar, as Brian Cookson put it, and make it a lot harder for that industrial type team organised or doping doctor organised widespread large-scale doping to go on, and by reducing those parameters and making it about reducing the window of opportunity for riders, I think in that sense it has been a reasonable success.
I think it's been most successful probably as a deterrent.
Which I think is a success. I mean, and there have been 2 biological passport cases recently, 2 very, very high-profile riders. Let's not forget Roman Kreuziger and Denis Menchov, and I think I welcome that. It's a good thing.
Absolutely. Wouldn't we rather have a system where people are educated and encouraged not to dope, rather than allowed to dope? Not allowed as in permitted to dope, but have a system in which it's possible to dope and then get caught, on an ad hoc basis when they trip the wire. I mean, that doesn't seem to be a particularly, well, it certainly wasn't effective for the 40 odd years that system was in place.
Right, well, let's go and read up on Denis Menchov and have dinner and perhaps do the 2 at the same time. That'd be nice. Let's leave it there and we'll be back tomorrow. Thank you very much, Lionel.
Thank you. It's jolly chilly out here, isn't it?
Thank you,
Daniel.
Daniel.
We had a 10-minute debate about it being too cold out here to podcast, and Lionel was adamant that it was balmy here in the Vosges this evening.
I'm fine.
I'm freezing
I'm
cold.
in a shirt here and I'm fine.
Right, well, we'll speak to you all tomorrow. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thanks, Lionel.
Podcast daily during the Tour de France. This is the Telegraph Cycling Podcast, supported by Jaguar.